Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our speaker series. I'm going to try. The Bedford Historical Society. Tonight we have our resident artist, Rick Backo.
Thank you.
All right, Rick.
Okay, good evening, everyone. And I am honored to have been asked to speak to all of you today in this presentation. I will focus on three prominent artists who were either born in Bedford or lived and worked here. I will be presenting their best-known pieces of art in my slide presentation. But as you may have noticed, I have on display several pieces from our Bedford archives, Historical Society archives and that. We are proud to show them here tonight. Speaking informally to you, I invite you to ask questions as they arise throughout my slide presentation. Afterwards, please feel free to browse the selection of artwork before you. I welcome the questions that you may have and look forward to discussing our Bedford art and artists. Some of you may be wondering why I was asked to speak with you tonight. You see, I am an artist at heart, and I am also a lifelong Bedford resident. In 1977, I graduated from Bedford High School and afterwards went on to attend Edinburgh State College in Pennsylvania, where I received my Bachelor of Fine Arts in Drawing and Painting, and with a minor in Art History. I am a recent retiree, having worked for the City of Bedford for 33 years. I continue to serve our city here as a volunteer at the Bedford Historical Society Museum. I have donated numerous pieces of my work to the museum. Several were sold at fundraisers or were placed in the museum for others to enjoy. Even in my working life, my love of drawing and painting never wavered. I prefer to work with watercolors, and my favorite subject matter has always been kind of nature related. I've sold my artwork in numerous art festivals and art shows in the Cleveland area. Additionally, I've accepted several commissioned works on various subjects, including several for our own museum. Throughout my lifetime, I developed a great liking for history, and especially for the history of Bedford. In a number of my paintings, I try to travel back in time to visualize how things were in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Researching through old photos and notes, I have created what I like to call historical recreations. I have a number of a couple examples over there, as you could see later on. When the opportunity arose to speak to you tonight about the art and artists of Bedford, I was touched and enthusiastically accepted, as my two passions are art and history, subjects which are familiar to me. So thank you, Betsy Lee, where'd she go? For asking me to do this, roping me into this. No, I love it. She's our Bedford Historical Society Director, for allowing me this wonderful opportunity. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please permit me to present to you the art and artists of Bedford. Okay, the first artist presented here today is Archibald Willard, the painter of the Spirit of 76, which I'm sure a lot of people know that he did that. He was born in Bedford in 1836. He was the son of Samuel Willard, the first regular Baptist preacher of the town. The exact date on which Willard was born is in doubt, but some say August 22nd or August 26th. The house that he was born in also is disputed, but it is generally agreed upon that the house was located on the south side of West Monroe Street, just east of Willis, and still standing today. Archibald was the fourth of 7 children. In the Willard house was the minister's wife, Catherine, Archibald's paternal grandfather, Jonathan, who was a veteran of the Revolutionary War. The story goes that the young Archie would go for walks down into the nearby Tinker's Creek Gorge with his grandfather, where he'd fascinate the boys with tales and his experience of America's war for independence. Perhaps these stories and experience would plant the seeds of his inspiration for his most famous painting that will come later in his life. The Reverend Willard moved his family to Wellington, Ohio, where the young Archibald would develop his artistic talents in painting barn doors and fences and later carriages and circus wagons. In 1872, Willard produced a pair of paintings called Pluck, which were published as lithographs by the J.F. Ryder Company in Cleveland. 10,000 sets were ultimately sold at $10 each, and his artistic career was firmly established. Archibald would later enlist in the Union Army during the Civil War, serving in the 86th Infantry Regiment in 1863 and 1864. While serving, he would sketch scenes of battlefield experiences and daily camp life. His sketches were published in Harper's Weekly magazine. On your right is a sketch, News from the Army. It is presented and is currently on display at the Cleveland Museum of Art. After he was done serving, he moved his studio to Cleveland, where he would execute his crowning achievement for the nation's centennial year. It would be a sensation at the Great Centennial Exposition World's Fair in Philadelphia, where it was hung in the building annex. Archibald would execute numerous original versions of the Spirit of 76. His first version of this famous piece was actually done as a satirical cartoon. Because of the centennial, his friends had suggested he complete a proper rendition. It is very likely that the first, more formal adaptation of the painting was lost or destroyed long ago. There are two original versions in Cleveland, with the earliest known version being on display at the Western Reserve Historical Society. In 1912, the city of Cleveland commissioned Willard to produce an 8-foot by 12-foot variant of the painting. This original painting is said to be his finest rendition of the Spirit of 76. It may now be seen in the lobby of Cleveland City Hall. Two men and a boy, two drummers, and a fifer. The three proud figures are commanding features in the painting, depicting the patriotic and triumphant spirit of the Revolutionary War. The young boy was Henry K. Devereaux, who later achieved prominence as an owner and driver of trotting horses. The fifer was Hugh Mosier, a friend from the Wellington area. The old gentleman, the most prominent model in the painting, playing one of the drums, is that of Archibald's father, the Reverend Samuel Willard, the first pastor of our Baptist church here in Bedford. Sadly, no original versions are in our museum, but we do have an original of one of Willard's lesser works, as well as some of his lithograph prints. And this, incidentally, right here is the original entitled "The Bees" of an oil of Mr. Willard that he did. The museum may have an original drum used in one of his paintings of the Spirit of 76. His Spirit of 76 continues today to be one of America's most widely produced paintings, rendered and used as logos and advertisement, as well as animated and presented in various cartoon film media. The artist would live until the age of 82. He died on October 11, 1918, and is buried in Wellington, Ohio at the Greenwood Cemetery. Does anybody have any questions on Mr. Willard? Okay.
Did he continue to paint all the way through his life?
Oh yeah, he did. A lot of his stuff wasn't well known, but there's, he has originals. We don't have any originals, but he has, there's originals around probably, and I have not done it yet, but I would like to go to Wellington, because I'm sure Wellington Historical Society has a lot of, his paintings and stuff, because that's where he lived most of his life. Yeah, Jack. Yeah, we do have a small original up there, very small. It looks like a watercolor.
Smallest painting.
Yeah. Jack, do you have a question?
Yeah, don't tell him you're from Bedford when you go to Wellington.
Yeah, I would imagine. I never did that. I would love to go to see that.
Oh.
Definitely, yeah.
If you go armed.
Yeah. Oh, he was only born there, and he lived there, 8 years, and that was it, probably. But, I don't know. You got to talk about him, right? So, okay, the second artist I wish to talk about is Richard Sedlon. He is by far the most accomplished of the Bedford artists. I have personally admired his work because of his creativeness, use of light, and use of space and movement within his compositions. Often I will browse the sketchbooks at the museum, trying to get into the mind of this artist to understand how he would created or dreamed up the little elf-like creatures he called pukas. And I just want to point out the use of light in that picture, which is kind of blurry, but in this, he had a wonderful use of light and source of light, and actually his compositions in this picture, which he did we'll get to it, but it did a lot of different variations of the tree of life here. But to me as an artist, I love the way he used the movement and set up his compositions in this painting of him. And we do have the original. It's huge. It's probably as big as this whole panel, but it's on the second floor of the museum there. Sedlon was born on August 26, 1900 in Philadelphia to Vincent and Hortense Sedlon. He was the second of 10 children. Both of his parents immigrated to America from Bohemia. The family moved shortly after his second birthday to Cleveland, where his parents settled on Meade Avenue on the city's east side. The whole family was musical, and Richard himself played the piano as a young man. His brother Joseph became a concert pianist. Brother Edwin traveled in the vaudeville circuit, performing in band with a guitar and a banjo. Also, Richard's mother was an accomplished pianist, where she would give piano lessons actually to help support their family during this time. At Fowler Elementary School, his first drawing experience took place in this chatterbox reader, which is kind of like a notebook, I would guess. In the margins, he would draw pictures instead of studying arithmetic and history. Where there was open space, he was known to draw. Not much of a scholar, Richard showed that he had more talent for making drawings in his school books than for memorizing lessons. Never attending high school, it was in the 4th grade, after a suggestion from the Kinsman School principal and while finishing the public school education, that he also attended the Cleveland Institute of Art at night. At the time, the school, the Art Oasis of University Circle, was located on Magnolia Drive on the city's east side. It was only a short walk away from his childhood home. It was at the Art Institute that he trained and worked with masters such as Frank Wilcox, Paul Travis, and William Summer. Richard landed his first full-time job working as an apprentice woodcarver for a company called McAllister's, which carved stairwells, woodworking portals, and doors for Cleveland churches and civic buildings. However, after a mishap where he accidentally dropped the door on the head of another worker, he was dismissed. Ouch. Yeah. But, and I read about that, and it's like, he also really wasn't into that job. I mean, he really just wanted to draw, and that's what I found out later about it. So, but, later, as he would incorporate these skills he learned at McAllister as a wood carver in the wood sculpture pieces, where he carved many woodland creatures and mythological subjects throughout his career as an artist. And I brought some of his samples of his wood carvings, where he had them all over his gardens, which we'll get to. Fortunately, through a friend of his father's, he obtained a job at the Morgan Lithograph Company. At the time, Morgan produced movie posters which were distributed around the United States. Originally, lithography had been used as an art form. It wasn't until the 1920s and 1930s in America that it was used primarily to promote movies. While at Morgan Lithograph, Sedlon made a portrait drawing on a lithostone of the movie starlet Loretta Young. The quality was so good that it was run off as a poster, and he was asked to do more. In a short time, he was moved from apprentice to journeyman, and within 3 years, he was placed in charge of reviewing the work of other draftsmen. For the remainder of his working life, he was a professional lithographer, joining the ranks of legendary artists like Goya, Toulouse-Lautrec, and Picasso, who were all artists and lithographers. And I just want to point out right here, if you guys look, this is one of the earliest known pieces we had in our archives at the Historical Museum that Richard did, probably about the time that he was working at Morgan Lithography in 1923, because it is dated 1923. So it was in March of 1950, well into midlife, that Richard married Ann Nargis. Ann's family owned the Dunham House, where the newlyweds took up residence. When Morgan Lithograph closed in 1960, the Dunham House became his permanent studio and workplace. And if you look closely, here's a plate that it was done by Arlene Furmeyer, who is Roger Furmeyer's. I don't know if it's a throne piece or whatever, but it is definitely, and it has Anne Elizabeth Nargis on there and Richard Sedlon. So it must have been kind of a wedding gift, because it's signed March 25th, 1950, which is, again, found inside the museum. Now torn down, it was in the back gardens of the historic Dunham House where he had kept his art studio. Weather permitting, he would do much of his painting outside in his garden. Many Bedford residents my age can remember when we were about 10 years old or so, peering over the fence in the Richard studio garden and being a little intrigued by this mysterious artist. Sometimes scared. I think I was a little bit scared of this dude. But he was always kind and welcoming and happily discussed his artwork with the young and old alike. Look what I missed out. Man, too being scared, you know. Doggone. It was in his garden that he created his paintings of large-nosed, gnome-like creatures, 6 to 8 inches tall, that he called pukas. Occasionally, he would incorporate other Bedford-related subjects into his artwork as a symbol of our history, which he cherished so deeply. And you can see with the red arrow where the spirit of 76 is in one of his paintings. The pukas were clearly an expression of Sedlon's inner self. Pukas never worked for money. They loved to plant gardens, paint, play music, read, and sing. What a life. Through the years, Richard would create several more whimsical, imaginative paintings and wood carvings, continuing subtle hints of sly humor injected into the activities of these busy little pukas. Often in his compositions, Sedlon would paint himself into an obscure corner of the piece. In this example, you can see Richard painting discreetly in the lower corner of this watercolor there. And if you go by these two, he's in these paintings, many other ones too, that we don't have here. In addition to his pukas, he would have scattered amongst his work various beautiful still life pieces showing off his skills as a realist. It has been said that his wife Anne would gather flowers and pick fruit from their gardens and arrange them for Richard to paint. And again, the still lifes were just gorgeous of him. The use of light and everything else. It's just pretty amazing. I'm always fascinated by the still lifes. I love them. Often during his life, Richard would spend time on one subject. One such work in particular is The Tree of Life, where he painted several versions of this title. Searching in his sketchbooks at the museum, I came across many different renderings that he would have used as studies. These sketches contain fluid lines of human bodies spreading from trunk to branches. The museum has a number of Sedlon's mythological plaster casts of Pan and Bacchus. All are reminders that he was just as good of a 3D artist as he was a 2D. Sedlon's wife, Anne, gifted these casts to our museums upon her death. They were transported here from his First Street studio and are located in the museum's second floor. And I did find one that was light, and I brought here. Because those things, yeah, I would have got to work out on that. So, during the last decade of his life, Sedlon would compose 2 watercolor paintings. The Bedford Gazebo was completed in 1982 and the Dunham House in 1987. The large original paintings of these works are now owned by the museum. In the late 80s and early 90s, signed prints were made from both paintings and sold to help raise money for the Bedford Historical Society Restoration Fund. Mr. Sedlon often donated his artwork for Bedford's charitable causes. Through the years, his generous nature repeatedly benefited our museums. Prints of these paintings and his other works are available for purchase at the museum gift shop, where they continue to support his charitable legacy. Yeah, so you can see Lori about that. And you know, these are the ones we're talking about that he gave, and there's so many people in here that are recognizable. One of them is, you know, you notice this woman here, Florence Catona, the librarian. Everybody probably as old as me knew Florence Catona. She was the librarian at the Old Bedford Library, and she is in this picture here with her Friends of the Library book that Richard has, skillfully put her in that. And here's Mike Buchar, Jack Wardley, Pete Dixon, and of course Dick Squire in there. In later years, vandals began to deface and steal his cherished artwork. The Sedlons were also struggling to maintain the large Dunham House and garden. So in 1974, they moved to a small house on First Avenue in Bedford, where he set up his last studio, and they remained for the rest of their lives. Richard would live to be 91. He died on February 9, 1992. His wife, Anne, would go on to live another 8 years without her husband. She died on October 27, 2000. Both are buried in the Bedford Cemetery. Take the dream out of life and you have nothing. It's all a dream, said Richard Sedlon. Are there any questions?
Comment.
What's that?
Well, I remember probably about 65, my children were little. We always went to Albrecht's meat store on Friday. And this man with the white beard and the red hunting jacket would come in and talk to the kids and give them each a penny for the gumball machine every time.
And that was Richard.
And that was Richard. Plus
All
I
right,
had
that's
a
pretty
friend,
cool.
Bob Densker, who had an antique and art store on Lorraine Avenue. He's passed away. He knew Richard. He went to school with him, to art school, and he said, oh my goodness, he said every time Richard would call me, I'd lock the store up and I just would listen to him talk. He was
Yeah.
a philosopher, a poet,
Oh, yeah.
artist. He said he was just a special man.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was.
And,
And I just kind of touched on some of the stuff he's done. He's just been in so many galleries and everything else that, you know, you just don't have time for him to do everything. But he was an amazing
more
artist.
in New York than he was here.
Right, right. So, what's that, Jack?
I went over to his house to do a picture and a story for the Bedford Times Register. And I don't remember the occasion was. It was some birthday or something. So I wanted to photograph him, and he wouldn't let me photograph him. He says, no, I don't do that. I don't do that. And I said, but you're an artist, and I'm an artist. This is my art. And he said, all right, go ahead. So I took a couple of quick pictures, and that was the end of it. Oh, no, he was such a warm man.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Surprising. He did not like to be photographed. And I
Right.
understand that. I don't particularly care for it either.
Yeah.
But, you know, it was an interesting afternoon. And what a warm person.
Yeah.
I just enjoyed that.
He did get photographed a lot by Mr. Vendetti, and I think that's one of the photographs there.
Yeah.
So I think they were pretty good friends. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And when they had that signing for the fundraiser, he had the Christmas picture, the pukas in Santa's beard, and I asked him to sign it. For
Yeah.
a friend. He said, Barbara, I never sign anything that little.
Well,
He finally did sign it.
And I forgot to mention that, and that picture, you know, that was right in this room where he gave out the prints and everything
Right.
else. I meant to ask, I forgot to say that, but yeah, so.
And then in that house, I remember going in there, and I think they still live there, and I don't even know.
First Street.
why, in the Dunham house. But the bed was enclosed in this like closet, and it was all painted around.
Right, yeah,
Do you
yeah.
know about
I was in his house, I visited his wife after he had passed, and actually, I went over there with the Historical Society after she had passed, and we ended up carrying those casts. I was one of the guys carrying those casts over into the museum, or back in the museum when those things were, like I said, they're pretty heavy.
He was-
So, and all his paintings and his sketches and stuff like that, and he had like pillars, kind of like this, white pillars, and he had the floral and stuff
Right.
all painted in his house
I
there.
still remember.
Yeah,
And it was a real long time ago.
yeah,
But
yeah,
he was a special man.
yeah, he was. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, I'm going to go to the third artist of Bedford I wish to talk about. It is quite different than Willard and Sedlon. Some say he might be better talked about as a naturalist than an artist. Yet because of the quality of his many sketches and the fluidity of his watercolors, I must include him here. Joseph Jersensky was born in Apathin, Hungary on September 14, 1905, and I hope I said that right. If there's any Hungarians in here, did I pronounce that right? I don't know. I'm a little bit Hungarian, but we'll go on with it. 5 years later, his family moved to the United States, settling in Cleveland. At the age of 16, Jersensky received a scholarship to the Cleveland School of Art for life, drawing, and landscape. In his later teens, he worked alongside his friend Richard Sedlon as an apprentice at Morgan Lithograph. Jersensky continued his art education in night school. Beginning around 1923, Joe would ride the ABC trolley line from his home in Cleveland to Bedford to explore, sketch, and take field notes of the beauty that has not changed of our Bedford metro parks. Whereas Richard Sedlon's studio was in the Dunham House and the Sedlon Gardens, Joe Jersensky's studio was in the Tinkers Creek Valley between 1923 and 1933, where he would hike and create his plein air sketches and watercolors. The Great Gorge was where Joe did his first sketching and exploration. As a young art student, he spent many of his free weekends year-round exploring the depths of the Tinkers Creek Gorge and the surrounding woodlands and farmlands. Jersensky's first introduction to Tinkers Creek Valley occurred one Saturday morning in June of 1923. From the ABC trolley line at Bedford Public Square, he would walk the winding road down to the dance pavilion, Bedford Glen's Dance Pavilion. His guide was waiting for him there. He was a Bedford artist called Paul Machenik, who fascinated him with talks of the Bedford Glens Park. Joe would start these weekend treks around the Glens area and traverse upstream through the gorge with his sketching and camping equipment. One of his sketches is a skillful rendering of the cliff trail of Tinkers Creek Gorge done in 1933. I have hiked this area quite frequently and have seen this trail. And the landscape has not changed in 90 years and is a testament to the accuracy of this man's his sketches. Traversing up the stream, he would encounter Hogback Point, Horseshoe Cliffs, and Junction Point Pool at Deer Lick Creek. Around 1923 and a little further upstream of Deer Lick Creek, Joe came upon the creek's rock shelter. It was here at his favorite area that Joe set up camp to sketch and compile his field notes. Mostly depicting himself camping, he would render various sketches of our beautiful valley. Further upstream, he set up camp at Hermit's Cabin, which is known today as Hermit's Hollow. Joe would gain an interest in Bedford's nomadic gypsy community and would sketch their camps and scenes showing their daily routines. The large gypsy camp was located off Northfield Road and Forbes Road. As he befriended several gypsies, he would sketch their detailed portraits. His best model was an old woman nearly 100 years of age. She wore a typical gypsy costume, including a heavy chain of gold coins around her neck. Her name was Old Sabella, the queen of the camp. Through these tireless wanderings of these remote areas, he would gain a lasting image of our beautiful Bedford Metro Parks. He would come to know the area like the back of his hand and sketch scenes depicting Old Button Road and Hogback Point. Originally done in black and white, he would colorize them in later years. One of his watercolors is right here, like I said, and that is my watercolor. Probably done 80 years after Joe did it, of the same view. I'm kind of looking more up to that than where he was back farther, but you can see the trees. That tree is grown still there, looks like, on the edge of the cliff. But as a kid, we were always down there. Scott's always down there, right? I mean, it's just, yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I kind of picked Joe for this, because this is in back of my house, the old Button Road Hill, which you used to be able to see the train trestle and that. Along with being an artist, poet, naturalist, and botanist, this gifted man was quite a cartographer. He would later in life draw a detailed map of our scenic and majestic Tinkers Creek Valley. Between 1923 and 1933, he located the natural and historic landmarks as they were during the decade of his ramblings. I, being a frequent hiker of this area, have located many of these areas and points on this map. Joe would also go to give many talks for our metro parks and national park programs using his vast knowledge of these areas. And it really, I walked this trail I did a copy of his map and just trying to find some of the parts. Some of them are really hard. I mean, that rock shelter is really hard to find. It's a hard track, and there's a lot of boulders to get to, but it's pretty cool if you get to it. And if things haven't changed down there, it's pretty cool. In our museum, we are fortunate enough to have many of this talented naturalist and artist field notes, maps, sketches, and watercolors. Jersensky was the first Cleveland Metro Park District naturalist to sketch and record wildflowers and plants in the park. In 1999, he would publish his notes and artwork in a book he wrote entitled Joe's Place. This book highlighted his lifelong love affair with the Cuyahoga Valley and Bedford Tinkers Creek parks. Sold in our gift shop, it is a very informative book and uses as many drawings and notes of our park areas. And it's a really good book. If anybody doesn't have it, I suggest to get it. If you like the areas in the park, it's pretty awesome. Joe passed away on June 19, 2008 at the age of 101. His final resting place is in Akron, Ohio. I don't know which cemetery. We tried to find that. We couldn't find it. But I will remember him most of his vast knowledge of our park, including his comprehensive map of our Tinkers Creek Valley. There any questions about Joe Jersensky?
Can you get a copy of the map in the gift shop?
We don't have any, but we should try to do that. I think that's a job for Jack, maybe. We can do that. Yeah, it's a good idea. And well, yeah. What do you think? I think that would be kind of cool. Yeah, there you go. That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
We need some hikes.
What's that?
I think we need some guided hikes.
Guided hikes? Okay, we can do that. We're retired. Okay, any other questions? What's up, Terry?
The guy that stopped the dam that they were proposing,
What's that?
was Jensky the guy who stopped the dam?
That was done in 1950. You mean the one by the mill sites there?
No, the one that they proposed to flood Tinkers Creek. Shawnee Lake.
I'm not sure. I heard that there's a story in there. I didn't investigate that, but it's possible because he might not have liked that. What's that? Oh, Janet, there you are. You got a comfortable seat.
He knows everything.
Well, Janet, yeah, of course, Janet knows.
That was Nimberg.
Oh, Nimberg?
Stop the dam. They were going to dam it up and make it a recreational area.
Right.
Did a study. Nimberg did a study that nixed the plan because it was.
Thank God.
Ruined all the things.
Right, so it wasn't Joe.
Wasn't Joe.
Okay. There you go. Knew somebody would help me out there. Good to see you, Janet. You got the most comfortable seat in the place. Okay, in our efforts to make our collections more accessible to all Bedford residents, our museum was expanded in 2004 to be ADA compliant. These renovations included the addition of not only an updated side entrance, but also an elevator and additional second and third floor exhibit space. Janet Caldwell, right there, the serving director of the Bedford Historical Society at the time, commissioned me and two other local artists, Roger Furmeyer and Tom Ramsey, to cover the existing back windows with art depicting scenes of how the second floor space was used throughout the building's history. Our artwork begins in the back stairwell and records the many different ways in which the second floor space was used. My window reflects the oldest use of the building when, as far back as 1874, the second floor space was used as a stage for theatrical performances, poetry readings, and musical performances. Roger, a former art teacher at Bedford High School, is sadly no longer with us, created the second of three pieces. His window honors our longtime Lions Club, whose meetings were held on the second floor. Did you go to any of those meetings, Scott? Several of his other works are found scattered throughout the archives, and some of his pieces here are on display tonight of Rogers. You got a couple charcoal drawings there. Tom, who specializes in miniature pieces, is known for creating trading pins, including past pins for our own Strawberry Festival. His window, the third and final window, illustrates the time period in which Bedford's Model Railroad Club staged their extensive model train layouts. While many of our famous Bedford artists are no longer with us today, we are still fortunate enough to have a few of our other local artists or their families here with us tonight. Several of their pieces are on display here tonight. Jeff Quinn was born in Madison, Wisconsin. After high school, he joined the Navy and was stationed in the Philippines during World War II. When he returned, he enrolled at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Upon graduation, he was deployed again and went to Korea during the Korean War. During his time overseas, he kept sketchbooks of his surroundings, the people we met there, and fellow soldiers. After returning, Jeff moved to Bedford and began his career as an art teacher, mostly in Beechwood. He continued to paint in many different media throughout his teaching career. After retiring, Jeff took printmaking and pottery classes at Tri-C and participated in student art shows. He also displayed his work in several different galleries and participated in the Puka Festival, now the Art and Artisan Festival. Jeff continued his painting into his 80s. He lived in Bedford until his death in 2013. The late Jeff Quinn Sr. is an artist who I admire greatly. He was diverse in his artistic presentations, worked in all different forms of media, and was very well known to me. He was my close neighbor, living 5 houses down from me on Turney Road as a kid, and I respected his talents and family very much. He was an impressionist, watercolorist, and abstract artist, and also a very accomplished musician, where he instilled that in his 4 kids. And Sue is not here tonight, is she? Dang. Okay. I just wanted to acknowledge him, but he was quite a guy, and he was my neighbor, so and I loved his artwork.
Yeah, he carved a salt block once I admired.
Yeah.
So I bought a salt block
Yeah.
and it ate away the metal on the shelves in the basement.
Right. Yeah, and some his work's there. You guys can look a little bit after this presentation here. Specializing in abstracts and landscapes in both mixed media and acrylics, this local artist, Sandy Spinks, is dedicated not only to the arts, but also civic duty, as she currently serves as one of Bedford's council members. And she also is the current president of Bedford Historical Society. She is the coordinator of the Art and Artisan Festival and works tirelessly on our Strawberry Festival. She is a People's Choice Award winner. Early works include charcoal drawings, but later she experimented with acrylic layering techniques on canvas. Her works are currently on exhibit at 78 Studio in Cleveland. Some of her imaginative work is here with us tonight on display to my right over here. And Sandy, would you please stand and be acknowledged? Are you already standing, dear? There's Sandy. We got one artist here today. Thank you. Besides me. So in closing tonight's presentation on our Art and Artists of Bedford, there are a few other artists which you see around here. I wish to at least recognize. I didn't have time to find when they were born or any biography on them, but we found their pieces in their archives and brought them down. So they include Harris Hubble, Ted Lockwood, Bill Lundblad, who did this carving there, Paul Patton, and George Rudd, who did the Walker China over there. So this concludes my presentation here tonight. I hope you found it informative and inspiring. As you browse the exhibit artwork, please feel free to ask me any questions that you may have regarding my presentation or pieces on display here tonight. Thank you all for your attention and for attending our Bedford Speaker Series. I just want to thank some people. I want to thank Betsy Lee, of course, again, our director here at the History Museum, who kind of roped me into this. But I'm glad I did it. Yeah. And also the Historical Society staff, including Lori Schroeder, Jack Gale Draga, Patrick Gilmore, Tim Randall, Paul Portman, who helped me bring stuff together here. Also Terry over here. I forgot Terry to write you down, Terry, but all you got, anybody who's in the Historical Society. And that last but not least, I know she doesn't want me to do this, but I want to thank Linda here, because I am computer illiterate. I'm an artist, right? So she put this together for me. Thank you. Thank you. And that's it. That's it. So any questions, I'll be around.